On October 7th, the world was at a point where the Palestinian cause was all but forgotten. Ukraine was the main focus, Saudi Arabia and Israel were on the verge of normalizing ties and moving ahead with their economic ambitions using Gaza's geostrategic location and stealing its gas, as I outlined in Part 1 and Part 2. When Hamas saw Netanyahu's plan for a new Middle East with Palestine literally wiped off the map, they understood that it was now or never, and they preemptively struck Israel on October 7th to sabotage these ambitions. And they used that as an opportunity also to take hostages so they could later free the thousands of Palestinians held hostage in Israeli jails. Hamas wanted a simple hostage exchange, but Israel jumped at the opportunity to play the victim card, to make up propaganda and start ethnically cleansing Gaza for their economic ambitions. A genocide on live TV. The Israelis know that they cannot fight man to man against the resistance in 2023. So they just slaughter civilians. To the point they even massacred some of their own people on October 7th with attack helicopters and tanks. That day was a major humiliation for Israel. So to save face, they said A, we will defeat Hamas or Hamas, and B, retrieve the hostages. Okay, well, what has Israel achieved in 3 months? Nothing. Israel, this great military power, summoned 360,000 reservists, 150,000 active troops. It has nuclear weapons, military and political support from the West. Biden sent them $14 billion and Delta Force. And what did Israel achieve? Not one military objective. Nothing. Hamas is still here. Every day, Qassam brigades film themselves, just casually taking out Israeli tanks, bulldozers, ground units. I mean, each destroyed Merkava tank is costing the Israelis a fortune. Israel are taking so many casualties, they just withdrew 5 brigades, plus their elite Golani brigade. I mean, Israel was unable to liberate a single hostage, and they even killed over 60 Israeli hostages in Gaza with their own bombs. But the war in Gaza is not just in Gaza. This is a war on multiple fronts. The first is Gaza, but the second is the West Bank. Jenin, Nablus, Ramallah, and many other towns are still under Israeli occupation. It's war every day. And after October 7th, Israel executed even more raids, more arrests, killings, torture. This united the resistance, factions like the Jenin Martyrs Brigade and the Lion's Den, inside the West Bank, and it united the West Bank with Gaza. I mean, this is such a blow to Israel. Remember, Palestinians signed the Oslo Accords. Palestinians recognized Israel. They gave half their land away. And what did they get after 30 years? Israel built more illegal settlements, killed more people, and blocked any viable path to a Palestinian state. The third front in this war is Syria. Syria is the only Arab state actor in the region that still champions the Palestinian cause. I mean, Palestinian Islamic Jihad is headquartered in Damascus, for example. And Syria is demonized because of this, and it suffers at the hands of the same enemies. Israel have been occupying the Syrian Golan Heights since 1967. 1/3 of Syria's land, with all the oil and the crops, is occupied by the United States. Now, the fourth front in this war is Iraq. Iraq is still occupied by the US since the invasion in 2003. The Iraqi parliament voted to kick the Americans out, but they don't respect their wishes. So you've got US bases in Iraq, you've got US bases on top of Syria's oil fields, and with the permission of the Syrian government, the Iraqi resistance move between the two countries, and they attack these American bases daily with drones, rockets, mortars, to create chaos for the Americans and for their occupation, and punish Washington for its genocide in Gaza. Remember, this is just as much an American war as it is Israeli. Now, the fifth front in the war is Lebanon. Since October 7th, Hezbollah have been firing daily at Israeli observation posts, destroying their most advanced surveillance equipment. And by limiting the front to a zone of a few kilometers deep, Hezbollah have masterfully put pressure on Israel while also avoiding escalation, thereby drawing Israel's forces north and stretching them thin. Over 100,000 Israelis have been evacuated and put into hotels, placing an enormous burden on the Israeli economy and giving them a taste of their own medicine of what it feels like to be displaced by war. Israel invaded and occupied Lebanon several times, and Hezbollah are the ones that finally kicked them out in 2000, except for an area called Shab'a Farms, which is still occupied. Now, Yemen is the sixth front in this war, and probably the most important. I mean, Yemen have done what Arab countries should have done from the very beginning: shut down the trade routes. Yemen have shut down the Red Sea and one of the most vital shipping lanes in the world. Yemen's position towards Israel is simple: you blockade Gaza, we blockade you. So effective is Yemen's endeavor that global trade is disrupted and ships have to go the long way around Africa like the old days, adding time and cost. Western companies in Israel are losing billions of dollars. Cargo traffic at Eilat is down 80%. Remember, Israel were also involved in the Saudi and American war against Yemen, and they have an illegal military presence on the Yemeni island of Socotra. The US lost that war, but now foolishly declare a new war on Yemen by killing 10 Yemeni soldiers. Look, if the Americans think that they have the right to come all the way from the other side of the planet and police the Red Sea to protect their precious Israeli base, well then Yemen certainly have the right to close it. Their water, their rules. The Israeli economy is failing very badly since October 7th. The shekel is down. You've got 300,000 displaced settlers who need to be put up in hotels, fed, given benefits. Many small businesses have had to shut down. Many Israelis are not coming to work. Israelis' trust in their military and government has eroded. They failed to protect them on October 7th and even killed some of their own people and killed some of the hostages. There is a lot of internal pressure on the Israeli government, especially from the families of hostages. Many Israeli soldiers are now disabled or suffering psychological trauma if they haven't been killed already on the front. You know, Israel claimed to be the safest place for Jews. At least 500,000 Israelis have left since October 7th, and it's unlikely they'll return. Israel's very existence is now under a microscope. Zionism is facing an existential crisis. I mean, it's a product of the 19th century. How can anyone in 2023 continue to justify settler colonialism? South Africa, who suffered under settler colonialism and apartheid, have now referred Israel to the International Court of Justice for genocide in Gaza. Malaysia have imposed a ban on all Israeli-owned and flagged ships. Colombia and Chile have recalled their ambassadors to Israel. Bolivia cut ties completely. Israel, you know, their image as a military power is gone. Netanyahu has nothing to show for the last 3 months in Gaza and has turned to assassinating resistance leaders who aren't even in Gaza. You know, the Israelis want to bait Hezbollah and bait Iran into a wider war so Netanyahu can stay in power with his war cabinet. And so in the span of a week, the Israelis have assassinated an Iranian officer in Syria, a Hamas leader in Lebanon, and bombed a commemoration in Iran on the anniversary of Soleimani's death. These events are no coincidence. Remember, Hamas doesn't run the West Bank, nor Syria, nor Lebanon, and yet Israel just keeps attacking them almost every day. This shows you that the Israelis are the problem. Even if Hamas disappeared the next second, Israel would still behave like this and still be occupying other countries and murdering people. It took the Israelis, by the way, 3 months to kill one Hamas leader who was not even in Gaza. So yeah, very impressive. Also, Israel have broken the rules of engagement. They have changed the equation by choosing to escalate against Hamas and Hezbollah. So now it becomes necessary for the resistance to respond, but without escalating.
لن تبقى دون ود وعقاب وبيننا وبينكم الميدان والأيام والليالي.
Clearly, the Israelis can target someone all the way in Beirut or Damascus and be precise when they want to. In Gaza, however, they choose to be imprecise and use 2,000-pound bombs to kill as many civilians as possible on an unprecedented scale. At the same time, the resistance has never been stronger. Israel and the US are drowning on 6 fronts. Israel is slaughtering people in this fashion precisely because it cannot win on the battlefield. Man to man, soldier to soldier, Israel fails. Failing to defeat Hamas, failing to rescue any hostages, Israel's objective is to make Gaza unlivable by demolishing its crucial infrastructure, hospitals, sanitation, roads, transport, schools. Israel's goal is ethnic cleansing. And while Israel succeeded in killing civilians and starving them and destroying Gaza's infrastructure, the civilians didn't leave. Palestinians aren't going anywhere. Israel and its benefactors have only proven that they are hypocrites and terrorists. Hence Israel's targeting of journalists to hide its crimes from the world. This war has backfired on Israel, as the Palestinian cause is now back in the spotlight. The resistance factions are united, as are the fronts. And Saudi-Israeli normalization is on hold. Israel is losing the propaganda war. Social media has raised awareness among young people. They see the double standard, how the West gave Ukraine weapons to fight Russia, but when it comes to the Palestinians, they oppress them and instead help Israel, the oppressor. People also realized that the West and Israel are hypocrites. This war has exposed how the West do not respect international law or human rights or democracy, but constantly undermine these values while lecturing other countries in the global South and sanctioning them. Israel has lost all credibility as more people learn about Zionism and settler colonialism. This whole image that the Israelis have tried to cultivate for 75 years, all the legitimacy, has gone down the toilet. Public opinion is shifting in favor of Palestine, and people worldwide are coming out to protest regularly. People see now that for the last 400 years, you've had the same powers committing the same crimes wherever they go. Genocide of Native Americans, genocide of Palestinians, genocide in the Congo, land theft, slavery, racism, apartheid, dropping nuclear weapons on civilians, carving up the Middle East, carving up Africa, carving up Yugoslavia, dividing Korea, dividing Vietnam, bombing Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, bombing Yugoslavia, invading Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Yemen, Palestine, sanctions, embargoes, coups in Latin America, coups in Africa, supporting apartheid South Africa, and on and on and on. What Western values are these exactly? Why is it always the same handful of Europeans, especially but not limited to Anglo-American corporations, armies, and banks? Are we supposed to be proud of that? Biden and the United States, they support Israel so adamantly because Israel is America's outpost in the Middle East. It is a base. And once Israel loses its grip on Palestine, the United States will lose its grip on the region and then its hegemony. Palestinians are fighting a war in Gaza on behalf of the entire world against Western imperialism. The West want to rule the Middle East with terrorism and fear, with occupation and oppression, with murder and theft, stealing. Look how they suck the planet dry and fill it with military bases and enslave everyone, killing and displacing millions over and over and over. They violate international law, they deprive people of freedom of life, murder journalists, murder children, murder civilians. No one is safe. What Israel and the West are doing in Gaza is an attack on humanity itself. It is an affront on all of us. Standing with Gaza is to stand against imperialism, against Zionism, and against US hegemony. Against the powers that oppressed blacks, South Africans, Palestinians, and Native Americans. It is the most important, the quintessential fight for justice, for world peace, for security, and freedom from oppression. It's not enough to just know these facts. You have to share this video. You have to educate people. Many are unaware or conditioned. Many are unsure. It's not enough to just watch. You have to pass on the message. You have to go out and demonstrate. You have to take a stand against this injustice. Be on the right side of history.